This week on The Review, we go behind the scenes in the Ramallah Bureau to see how we've been covering the Israel-Palestine story. Hello and welcome to The Review, the show that goes behind the scenes here at Al Jazeera but lets you, the viewer, do the talking. We have a special episode this week. We are in Ramallah in the occupied West Bank with the Al Jazeera crew here to see how the channel has been covering the story as the violence escalates across the occupied West Bank, Israel and the Gaza Strip. Before we get to that, let's take a look back at the events that unfolded in the past.
Let's go to Jerusalem. Breaking news coming out of there of the Al-Aqsa Mosque compound being stormed again.
We are getting reports that Israeli forces have been clashing.
Unprecedented shock within the walls of the old city as gunfire rings out and people scatter.
Palestinian man stabbed and wounded an Israeli teenager.
A 13-year-old boy shot in yet another clash between demonstrators and the Israeli army in the occupied West Bank. The aim of the demonstrators was to cross through the Escalating crossing. The resistance was fierce but limited to stones.
Fighting across the West Bank has seen 5 Palestinians and 4 Israelis killed since Sunday.
In Hebron, where one of the protesters died, and then here in Ramallah, where students of Birzeit University had called for their own day of rage.
2 Israelis have been stabbed as tensions rise across Israel and the occupied Palestinian territories.
Revenge attacks every day. News of another stabbing.
Yes, indeed. We did that report about the stabbing in Dimona there.
Palestinian teenager Fadi Aloun was shot and killed.
Israeli security forces shoot dead a Palestinian man in Jerusalem.
3 Palestinians are killed, 4 Israelis injured in another day of violence.
This is the ugly reality of what's happening here.
Anybody with a grudge at short notice, pulling a knife, crude, random violence.
Now, the Israeli army has announced within the last hour that it will be deploying 6 companies of Israeli soldiers.
Later on the streets outside, 2 gunshots and the dark figure by the doorway, one of the special force officers, has shot dead a Palestinian man.
Back here in the occupied West Bank, it's been a very volatile situation. Let's give you a quick look now on what's been happening on the road when I went out with Huda Abdelhamid and her cameraman and producer. Huda, you've spent 2 weeks now reporting from the occupied West Bank. You found yourself most of the time in the middle of conflict zones. How do you determine when it's safe to report from conflict zones and when it's time to pull back?
Well, you have to keep an eye all the time on the dynamic of the ground. Who is moving where in which direction. It's very unpredictable here as opposed to other war zones where maybe there is 2 warring factions that are quite clear. Here there's a lot of young people who are daredevils, I would say. There's an army that goes up and down. It's a cat and mouse game, so you always have to keep an eye on that to make sure that you are not in the line of fire, that you try to keep away from the tear gas, which anyway would choke you to a level that you can't report anymore.
There was one instance where you were doing a live shot in one of the news bulletins and the Israeli army targeted your crew.
We were not actually close to the flashpoint. We were on a hill overlooking it, and next to us there was maybe a group of 20-30 Palestinians who were sitting there watching what was going on. At some point during the live, Rawan, our producer, points out to the fact that there's an armored vehicle coming just ahead. So I turned around, looked at it, and at that point the Israeli armored vehicle stopped. 2 soldiers came out and shot at us, and that was it. So we had to get out of there, but there was no reason for that to happen, and I didn't see what happened next, but from what I was told, because they just got into the car and continued. There was no reason for them to be on that road. Nothing was happening, and the bulk of their troops were nowhere close. To us, they had actually broken away, come on along that road to intimidate probably the Palestinians who are watching, intimidate us, and then just left.
There were several instances in Ramallah and the surrounding areas where there have been violent clashes that have broken out. A lot of times tear gas, rubber-coated steel bullets, as well as live bullets have been shot. Take a look at what happens when the situation gets a bit too tense for the teams to stay on the field.
Trying to go to the live location for your next live shot, and a bunch of protesters were running up the hill after tear gas was thrown and some stones, I think I heard you say, were being thrown. What do you do in an instance when there is rocks?
Well, you just have to, it's so volatile and you never know where the clashes are. You know the location, but you don't know in which direction it's going to play. So every day you come and you have to study the situation. If they're throwing rocks, you just have to be far away from them because you know there's going to be a response. You won't be able to work and it's dangerous. So, for example, this time we can't be on that side. We were reporting from that side over the past few days. Now we're going to have to go around and try to find if we can be on the other side. It's more complicated when you are doing lives.
Okay, Huda, we were just in the car right now trying to head to the next live location, which was Beit Il. We were expecting the protesters to be over there at the roundabout where the clashes have been happening just outside of Ramallah. They've started firing tear gas, the Israeli army. We've backed the car out until we can find a safer location. What can you tell us about what's just happened here in terms of determining when to leave and not to go in?
Okay, I'll explain to you. We were up that hill over there, right? That's where we usually go to get an overview about what's going on. If you see, the protesters are now the bulk of them on that road. You see them there?
Yeah.
So there's several factors. Most of the tear gas is going that way. Now you see the direction of the tear gas.
Yeah.
If we had stayed up there, we would be relatively safe, but all the tear gas is going there.
It's going that direction.
So you can't really stand there for long because you'll just be overwhelmed by it. So now we're trying to go around. If we are,
no,
you can
are
see
those Israeli soldiers?
Those are Israeli
running
soldiers, and you'll see them shooting to try to keep the protesters as far as possible from them. You'll see now.
Oh, they've started shooting. Can you, as a journalist, with all of the experience you have on the field, tell the difference in the sound between rubber-coated steel bullets, live bullets? Is it?
Personally, I get it sometimes right, sometimes wrong. But what happens is that we ask each other, do you think it's live? Is it? In general, one of them has a crackling after it, so you know.
Yeah.
If I'm not wrong, it's the live ammunition that has a bit of a crackling, right, Joseph? Yeah. The rubber bullet is more of a dry
and the
pop.
Tear gas that they fire sounds as well like the dry pop you're talking about, no?
Yeah, the tear gas, and then you'll see immediately after tear gas going. So maybe I don't see any tear gas here, so maybe it was some rubber bullet, but it was definitely not live emission.
All right, are we going to try to head back now into that direction?
No, we're going to go around it because if we have to stand with the SNG and do things, there's no point of us being here. We won't be able to stay for long here. Right. So we're going to try to go behind the Israeli soldiers.
Okay.
All right, and also we wouldn't be upwind at that stage, so the effect of tear gas will be less.
And take a look at what happened when we finally got a chance to set up our live shot in Beit Il. We've just come back from roaming the streets of the West Bank with you. The last bit was very tense, as our viewers have seen. What can you tell us about the decision that you had to make, the quick call to pull out of the Beit Il location?
Well, it had to do with two factors. We had to go live to continue reporting, and the dynamic on the ground was moving, and we didn't know in which direction it was going. So the protesters had run from one side, the army was closing in. We could have been in the middle, we couldn't have been in the middle, we didn't know how it was going to develop. So we had to pull out so we were able to continue reporting, because at the end of the day, if it starts right there when you have to go live, then you're not reporting anymore.
What we saw, and correct me if I'm wrong, but what I remember was the protesters, they used a different tactic today than they did the past 2 weeks, which is they came around to the side where the journalists all were, because they knew that the journalists were a bit more protected. But then that puts you, the journalist, in the line of fire, essentially, because what happens then?
Exactly. They were fewer than there was a small group of them, but they clearly wanted to be where we were. They were throwing stones from behind our area and then running away.
And that means the soldiers?
That means that the soldiers had to advance to keep them, and then they ran away into the side streets, and that kept on going back and forth for several hours, and you get confused. Okay, should I stay? Should I go? We are not the target there. This is the first time I see it like that.
That's it from here in Ramallah for this edition of the reVIEW. Bye for now.